Tonight we discussed intention like a man, intention like an animal, and we finished the chapter. Wow, what a chapter. Come join us for this final class. Lag BaOmer is celebrating the inner dimension of Torah. Lag BaOmer has two reasons why we celebrate. One, the students of Rabbi Akiva who stopped dying from plague that started Passover and continued until today, until Lag BaOmer, because they didn't properly respect each other, and therefore it's a day when we focus on loving each other, respecting each other, appreciating each other, Jewish unity, Jewish pride, Jewish love. Even more focused, perhaps, the day of passing of one of the greatest students of Rabbi Akiva, Reb Shimon Bar Yochai. He's buried in Meron, and 350,000 Jews come every year to celebrate with him, because on the day of his passing, shortly before he passed away, he said to his students, I want everyone to celebrate. I'm going to my wedding. Now I'm going to be fused with God. Like, this is amazing. This is great. I'm so excited. So at such a time, he said, I want everyone to be happy. And if everyone is happy and rejoicing with me, it's like my joy is your joy. Now we're taught by the Alter Rebbe, whose work, the Tanya, we are studying, that the passing, the day of passing, what we call in Yiddish the yard site, the day of passing of a tzaddik annually is an amazing thing for us. Because on the day of passing, all of the godliness accrued by a lifetime of merits comes down to shine in this world at a greater intensity annually, every single year. Every single year it gets stronger and stronger and stronger. This enormous light created by this very holy Jew, by this tzaddik service of God. So every single year on Lag BaOmer, all that was accomplished by Reb Shimon Bar Yochai comes down again at a higher level to create salvation in the world. Now this is true for the date of passing of every tzaddik. But Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, he was the one that said, celebrate. This is a special day. This is my wedding. This is my fusion with God. And this is the time we're told, this entire day, so we'll still keep the energy now, the gates of heaven are open. The time when Jews turn for salvation, when Jews receive salvation. There's a reason why people all over the world make great efforts to celebrate and mark this day. This day has enormous power. So I'm very glad that we are going to be learning, because what was Reb Shimon Bar Yochai's life? His life was Torah. His life was not only Torah, his life was the inner dimension of Torah. That's why, if you wondered, we have bonfires. One of the traditional ways of celebrating on Lag BaOmer is making a bonfire. Why? It's cool, it's nice, you got marshmallows, hot dogs. I mean, what was he thinking? Marshmallows or hot dogs? No. The fire symbolizes the fire of the inner dimension of Torah. And we are right after the side note on page Nun Aleph. And what we were discussing was another level of metaphor, of parable, to understand the dynamics between the act of serving God and the intention of serving God, and the fusion of the act with the intention. We initially developed the parable of a body with a soul versus a body without a soul. And the body without a soul, we said, doesn't mean a corpse, but the body without a soul meant the energy, the spirituality of body. The body with a soul meant the spirituality of soul. So we have the spirituality of soul versus the spirituality of body, spirituality of soul when you serve God with intention, spirituality of body when you serve God without intention. So look at the difference when you just, of course, it's not just, we need our mind, we need our focus, but when you follow Esther's 3-second rule and you infuse intention to your service that you're doing anyway, it lifts up your service, like the difference between the spirituality of your body and the spirituality of your soul. The second metaphor we brought was the 4 levels, the 4 stratas of inanimate, vegetation, animal, and man. And we said all 4 of them have godliness. They all have the same godliness. All of the godliness in the world has to go through this enormous constriction called klipas noiga, this enormous force that really makes very, very, relatively speaking, small the godliness to squeeze into this world. So it's all the same, but it's very different, because a vegetable, a plant, a flower, a tree needs a lot more energy than a rock, and therefore has a lot more godliness. And an animal, more intelligence, more language, more abilities, can do more, needs more godliness than a plant, and obviously how much more so a man. So it's an excellent metaphor for this concept. First of all, the advantage of this one over the first one is now we have 4 levels instead of 2 to talk about. So we have 4 points of comparison as versus 2. And also it makes a lot of sense to us, this concept that, yeah, it's all the same godliness. It's all klipas naiga, godliness that got into this world. But it's very different, the life of a stone and the life of a tree and the life of an animal and the life of a man. So it's the same and it's different. We get that. So that was a good metaphor from that perspective. Symbolizing, we said, the lower 2 levels is serving God through action without the intention. The next higher one is serving God through speech and thought, but still without intention. And then the last 2, comparable to animal and man, is the intention, the natural love and fear of God, animal-like because it's instinctive. And the highest level, the man, symbolizes an intention that we develop with our mind, using our mind to create a love and fear of God. Now, I'm saying love and fear, even though we've been saying how intention means to think like this and to think like this. I'm doing this because it's your will. I'm doing this to connect you. I'm doing this to bring God into this world. I'm doing this to bring redemption, all of which are great, valid intention. Intention is really both. Intention could mean a mental focus, could mean an emotional focus, could mean both. Intention is fusing your action, which of course has innate meaning because you're doing God's will, but fusing it with a conscious, focused level of significance, of meaning. So that was the second metaphor. And the third one was the idea of a light in a vessel. Above, in the spiritual realms, the only fabric is godliness. So they're godly lights in godly vessels. So what makes one a light and one a vessel? How do you get to be a light versus a vessel? Well, the more expansive energy is the light. That same energy constricted is the vessel. So the light, the more expansive energy, is contained in the vessel, which is the same fabric, but in a more constricted form. Light in a vessel. And that's a great metaphor because, again, we keep coming back to this theme. What's the difference between the energy of the commandment and the energy of the intention? It's the same thing. It's the same energy. It's all God will. But the difference is it expansive or is it constricted? Like the light is expansive, the vessel is constricted. Constricted and expansive what? Same thing. Constricted light, so expansive light, light. Constricted will of God when you do the commandment. Expansive will of God when you do the commandment with intention. So we said, wait a minute, is it the intention, the commandment with intention? It was getting a little blurry in our brains. So we clarified that really this expansiveness is created by the intention, not because we're so holy, not because we're so significant, but because this is God's will. This is how God structured it, that the intention draws down his will in an expansive form. And that energy lifts up the commandment done with this intention. So the whole package deal, the commandment with the intention, all are now flooding you with this expansive will of God. As we said, the light is the same light, but it's a light now that our soul can perceive, our soul can benefit from, our soul is basking in, and therefore we change. So that is exactly where we're up to. So if you're looking inside, we are right next to the side note, which means the second of those small lines on page Nunala. Now we're going back. So again, we went through 3 metaphors, right? The first one was spirituality of soul versus spirituality of body. The second one was the 4 levels of inanimate, vegetation, animal, and man. The third was the light in the vessel. Now we're going back to the middle one to speak about these 4 levels. And we can also, really, we already alluded to, but now we're going to develop more, take this concept and divide it into 4 levels. Ki guf hamitzvah atzman mamish heim beis madrigos. If we're looking at the service of God itself, literally, without the infusion of intention, there's 2 levels going on here. Shem mitzvos maisios mamish, because we have the literal act of an action commandment, right? You put that coin in the charity box. You salted the meat to drain out the blood. You checked the clothing. Was it a mixture of wool and linen? You did an action commandment to serve God. And then we have a higher dimension of serving God with one's speech and even more with one's thought. Until now, like starting with chapter 35, we were discussing the idea of action as supreme. The best way to serve God, action. Why is action the greatest way to serve God? Because specifically with action, that is how God's presence comes down. God's presence is completely revealed. You are completely nullified. You're nothing. You're just a physical manifestation of the will of God. Wow. That is so powerful. That was so amazing. That's action. And that's what we spoke about in 35 and 36 and 37. Action, connection, action to bring the redemption. Action, action, action. Beginning of 38. Action. And now we're saying there are other ways of looking at it. Because now when we're making this hierarchy, we put the inanimate representative of the literal actions that we have been discussing in chapter 35, 36, 37. And we're saying, but from another perspective, higher than them is serving God with speech, and even higher serving God with thought. Because there's many different ways of looking at things. And now we're looking at the value of giving God your very inner self. Meaning, there's a value in doing. And God is expressed in this world, and that's amazing. There's a value in giving God your inner dimension. When you study Torah, you and God are one. Your mind and his are fused in a degree of oneness that completely blows away anything you could ever accomplish by doing an act. But action's better from a certain perspective, from the perspective of drawing down the divine presence, Shekhinah, the divine presence, being revealed through you and because of you and through the commandment that you're currently doing. Yes, nothing can be like that. But from the perspective of giving God me, well, the more inner the me is, the more the me is being given. When I'm doing an action, it's a very external level of self. When I'm giving God my thoughts, wow, that's really, really me. That's why the connection to God through thought is so much more powerful than the connection to God through anything else. The greatest way we become one with God, very appropriate to mention on Lag BaOmer, again, is studying Torah. Right? Rashbi's whole issue was Torah. That's his fire, the inner dimension of Torah. That's his life. 13 years in the game. What's he doing? Torah, day and night for 13 years, literally. Fire of Torah. That was his consuming his entire being. So we can't do it for 13 years straight. We probably can't do it for an hour straight. But every time we do it, for whatever minute we do it, we could also connect to that fire. The Lubavitcher Rebbe says that whenever you're studying, like a lesson, a takeaway from Lag BaOmer could be, however many minutes you're studying, be completely there. This is your fire. This is your life. This is your reality. Okay, it's not 13 years. All right, it's 6 minutes on my watch. But for those 6 minutes, this is your fire. This is your life. This is all there is. And literally through Torah, we become one with God like nothing else. So therefore, of course, it's true what we learned in chapter 35, 36, 37, and the beginning of 38. Action is supreme in terms of drawing the divine presence to be completely revealed in this world. And in terms of giving my inner self to God, my fusion with God, God transforming me, the more inner is a level of service, the more intimate it is, the more God is taking over my very being. And therefore, from that perspective, inanimate is the action, and a higher strata, vegetation, is mitzvahs of speech, and even higher, mitzvahs of thought. But those are the two lower stratas, because we're doing them without intention. We're just thinking that commandments. Now we're going to focus on intention. So in the middle of this thought, like all these ways of serving God with your speech and with your thought, studying Torah. The commandment is a biblical commandment to say Shema, prayer, which is also a biblical commandment, saying a blessing after eating, which is also a biblical commandment, and other blessings, which are rabbinic and also ways of serving God. So that's the two lower ones. They're drawing down the same thing as the two higher ones, but it's a little constricted, so my soul isn't benefiting from it as much. I have it, but I can't really unpack it. I can't really use it. Does someone have a question, Esther?
Yeah, I have a question. The inanimate is action, vegetation, speech, animal.
Vegetation is commandments of speech and thought. They're put together within vegetation, as obviously within vegetation you have, a tomato and you have an oak tree. So you have within any of these like a broad spectrum So we have on the lower end of the spectrum, commandments of speech, and on the higher end of the spectrum, commandments of thought.
Okay, and then did we divide further? That's what we're about to do.
That's what we're about to do. Because these, now again, I have the ability to infuse my commandment of action by giving charity with intention, mental or emotional. I have the ability to infuse blessing God before or after I eat or any other time of day. My prayer, which obviously should have intention, that's very organic to prayer. My Torah study. I can infuse any of these and lift them up, as we learned, and I reminded you a few minutes ago, to the level of intention. When we're saying they're inanimate and vegetation, we mean if no intention was infused in them. If they were done, as is very likely we do these commandments sometimes, without intention, that's where they are, that's where they'd be. If we infuse them with intention, the commandment gets lifted up to the expansiveness, the level of feeling that flow of intention. Meaning when I'm saying, just to understand this, because it's such a critical point in this chapter, this is really the point we keep coming back to. I don't know of a good metaphor for it. Maybe a language. You know, if you were a young child, and as a child, your parents spoke to you in Portuguese. You were 2 and 3, and, you know, you were surrounded by Portuguese. And then they left Brazil and came to America, and they wanted you to acclimate very quickly. So they dropped all the Portuguese, and we're just speaking English. So all of that language would get buried somewhere in your brain. It would still be there. You didn't lose it, but it would be very constricted. It wouldn't be something that you would be benefiting from and accessing. If you then went to college and said, oh, I've got to do a language. Hey, officially, I know Portuguese. Let me learn it, even though I haven't heard it spoken in the last, 14 years. Suddenly, as you're in college and the class is like triggering all these memories and the language is coming back to you, suddenly you're flooded with all this knowledge that you had the whole time. It was in your mind the whole time, but you weren't benefiting from it because it was constricted. It was like in a tiny little box somewhere in your subconscious. And now you like open the box and you're allowing it to be expansive. Now it's flooding your mind. So I don't know if that's a perfect metaphor, but that's sort of like what we're trying to say in this chapter. Every time you serve God, you're drawing down God's will, of course. And of course, it's benefiting you. And if you serve God completely on autopilot, it's still, of course, benefiting you. Of course, God's will is coming into you. And of course, it's helping you in your mind, in your heart, in your soul, in your body, no question. But if you add intention, now it's like you unwrap the package and you're just letting the whole thing flavor you, the whole thing, give off its aroma, its power. And that's what the Rebbe is pushing here for. What the Rebbe is trying to inspire us to do is to we're doing the commandment anyway. But imagine adding to it this whole dimension of intention to really benefit from what we're doing. Did anyone manage over the week to try Esther's 3-second idea? Anyone remembered it enough and tried to do it or try to do something else to have intention? Well, if not, guess what?
I did it a few times, but I don't particularly remember it wasn't life, I didn't notice the life shattering.
You didn't notice it's a life altering experience, but you did it.
I got to do it more.
I honestly, it's sometimes we do feel it, like in anything in serving God. And maybe it's soul specific, maybe it's situation specific, maybe it's, someone was telling me recently, she's just learning Tanya now. I said, now for the first time, it's actually really affecting her and it's so great. And maybe it's the teacher she's learning with. I said, it could be the teacher. It can also be because you've already learned it several times. So, each time, you're opening up a little more, it's penetrating a little more, and then finally, click. And wow. So I think that could be also with the intention, maybe there'd come a point where you're really going to feel it and maybe you won't, but that doesn't take away that it's really helping. It's really making a difference. And sometimes, of course, if you feel it, it's easier to stay focused and do it than if you don't feel it. But guys, we just had Friday, Pesach Sheni, which the theme is, it's never too late. We're never a lost case. We always have another opportunity. So right now, as we're learning, we can all try to mentally focus. God, why am I doing this now? I might have something else to do. Maybe my dishes are calling my name. Maybe my, work is calling my name. Maybe my phone is calling my name. Maybe my social media. Maybe my bed. God, I'm doing this because I know this is your will. I know this is what you want me to do. And I'm doing what I know is how you want me to act, how you want me to serve you, how you want me to live my life. And just having that thought as we're doing this, we're filling this class with intention. And that's going to totally change how your soul is going to benefit from all the godliness coming to you because we're learning now. So continuing, the kavanat mitzvahs, the intention of the commandment, again, mentally, the overarching intention always comes back to clinging to God. So I just said, I'm doing this because it's your will. I'm doing this because this is what you want me to behave. But underneath that is the idea of, and therefore, this is the way I become one with you. And therefore, this is how we fuse. So that is the essence core of every intention. God, this is your will. This is how we become one. This is what you want from me. So that intention is always like the soul in the body. The body is the action of the commandment. Action of the commandment could be a commandment of action, speech, or thought, but it's all like we use the metaphor, the vessel containing the light, the body containing the soul, the commandment containing the intention. And we said when we do that, when the commandment is containing intention, the spirituality, the expansive of intention lifts up and changes the spirituality of the action herself to be on that level. Well, we have two levels also within intention. Kimo, shte madregos hanashama, shein beguf hachomri, shein chayim medaber. Two levels of intention, two levels of soul, parable to animal and man. Again, we have four levels here. Inanimate, the commandment of action in of itself without intention. Vegetation, commandments of speech and thought without intention. And now we have animal and man. Animal, the animal-like godly intention. Man, the man-like godly intention, as we're now going to discuss. Now we're going to start high. We're going to go to man. Because someone who has a very fine mind, to know God, to contemplate the greatness of God, to create, literally your mind is creating your emotional reality. You're creating an awe of God, you're creating a love of God, that your soul should be thirsty for God, to cling to Him, which I achieve, I cling through Torah mitzvahs. Because when I serve God through the Torah and through the commandments, I'm bringing Him to me. The energy of God, the infinite energy of God is coming to me. And that's how we become one. That's how I fuse with Him. That is the highest of the four. That's the intention of a man. Why is it the intention of a man? Why am I saying that's man-like intention? What I said, unpack, was I'm using my mind to create the emotions of love and fear, which are the catalyst for my service and which are infusing my service. Meaning, because I love you, God, I'm doing this. If you love someone, you want to give to them. If you love God, you want to serve Him. That's what He wants. If you love someone, you want to be with them. I want to be with God. How am I, creation, tiny little me, one with God? By the way He created. God, me, and there's that point of connection. And what's that point of connection? When I learn Torah or do the commandment. So I love you, God. I want to give to you. I love you, God. I want to be with you. I have awe of you, God. I want you to fill all my space. I have an awe and a sense of what you want from me, and that's what I want to be doing. So as I use my mind, create these emotions are the catalyst. They're what's inspiring my service. And these emotions are saturating my service, as we're going to discuss in the upcoming chapters at length, this very basic and significant concept that every commandment is like a bird. Now, if you had a bird and for some reason you clipped its wings, like it didn't want to fly away, it's still a bird. It's alive. It can make whatever noises a bird makes. It could walk as a bird can walk. It can eat. It can excrete. It can do everything, but it can't fly. With wings, the bird flies. The bird ascends. The bird goes up. Commandment without intention is a bird without wings. It's a whole bird, but it's not flying anywhere. When you have intention, now the commandment is lifted up. It's flying. Where's it flying to? It's flying to the levels of God, as we will discuss in the upcoming chapter. Depending on the intention, depends where it goes. So therefore, when I use my mind, create a love of God, use my mind, create an awe of God, and those emotions then engender me to serve. They're the catalyst of my service. And those emotions are saturating my service, that my service has wings. It's the bird with wings. It's ascending to God. That is the man level intention. Why is it intention like a man? What does a man have to do with that? Well, 2 points here. One is men have choice. That is unique to man, free choice. Everything else is programmed. The concept of using my mind to create is an expression of choice. It's not natural to me. I don't naturally feel these emotions. They're not wired in my psyche or even wired in my soul. It's something I'm making a conscious choice to do that otherwise wouldn't happen. So that's a man-like ability. Also, a second very unique thing of a man, besides having choice, which is only unique really to the Jew and in a very limited way, of course, vis-a-vis the Noahide laws to a non-Jew, and with us in a very expansive way, but nothing else in all of creation has choice. The other thing that man has different than all of creation is intellect. Now, of course, according to Torah, plants have a certain type of intellect. Animals have more intellect. But the intellect of a plant or of an animal is very primitive, is very minuscule. A man, the whole glory of man is we have a mind. That's what makes us different than every other animal. So this intention is man-like because I'm choosing. It doesn't happen to me naturally. And because I'm creating it with my mind. It's not like I'm just have a flash of inspiration, have a flash of emotion. No, I'm using my mind and I'm thinking a lot to get to this point. These ideas, these strategies is really discussed in the first 17 chapters of Tanya. And it's a lot of mental work to create this emotion. So I'm choosing and using my mind. This is a man. So this is the highest of the 4 in this parable: inanimate, vegetation, animal, and man. Creating emotions through our mind, through our choice, through our intellect, and these emotions stimulating our service, and these emotions lifting up our service, the wings of the bird, because our service is saturated with these feelings. And once you've created this intention, now again, here, the word intention is the whole dimension of feeling. With this intention, you learn, you study Torah. You fulfill the commandments. And with this intention, you pray. Obviously, prayer is definitely an arena where we really need and want intention and thought and feeling. And you bless. Imagine the difference between blessing and meaning it. And if we can imagine blessing meaninglessly. So, of course, we're always supposed to have intention. But come on, especially when you pray. Especially when you learn. Especially when you bless. So this intention, al derech mashal, metaphorically, like the soul of a man. Because as we're saying, man possesses intellect and choice. And those are the two characteristics of this type of intention. With intellect he speaks, right? Because we say midaber. What's special about us is that we speak, but our speech is a reflection of our intelligence. So that was the highest level. We went to the top of the ladder. Now we're going a notch below, but listen, that other one's pretty good too, because it's still intention, it's still drawing down expansive will of God, it's still flooding your soul, it's still very beneficial. Now we're going to do the second level in this very broad swath of intention, the intention that's animal-like. And again, if we understand why that higher one is man-like, the animal-like one makes a lot of sense. If the higher one is choice and intellect, probably the animal is not so much choice and not so much intellect. Exactly. And someone whose mind is smaller, to really know, his mind's like a little small to really know and contemplate the greatness of the infinity of God. You're like, well, what's his problem? It's not what's his problem. It takes a very good mind that knows and that has time to contemplate and delve. It's like rare, not common, to be able to create man-like intention. You have to have a good mind, you have to have a background, you have to have knowledge, and you have to have time to focus and do all this. So if you don't have all that in your back pocket, and therefore you're not going to be able to do this, you're not going to be able to create love from your understanding that should be revealed in your heart. You're not going to be able to create this intellectual fear in your mind, an even greater level of awe that's so intense it actually penetrates your heart. You're not going to do it. You can't do it. Again, for any of the reasons why your intellect isn't up to it, as I just enumerated. Rock only, but don't worry, as we said, Pesach Sheni was last Friday. You're not a lost case. There's plenty you can do. He remembers, he elicits the natural hidden love, what's embedded in the heart of every Jew. You're Jewish? How do I know? Well, was your mother Jewish? Your mother's Jewish. Her mother was Jewish. You're Jewish. You're Jewish, you have a soul. You're Jewish, you believe in God. You're Jewish, you love God and fear God. The same way, if I know you're Jewish, I know you have a soul, which by definition means I know your core is soul, so you have a natural belief in God, like it or not. You also have a natural love for God, and a natural fear of God, a natural awe of God. These are all embedded in our soul. So I'm not using my pure man-like abilities. I'm not choosing. I have this naturally. I don't need to create this with my mind. So it's more animal-like, it's more instinctive, it's more natural, it's not intellectual as much, though trust me, we do need to use our mind to elicit it. But it's a very powerful force. It's embedded in my soul. It's a love and fear and awe that I have by virtue of my soul that's really powerful. Like the animal is really powerful, a lot of brute strength. This love and fear and awe is really powerful. It's from my very soul. But I do, of course, have to do some work, because not everyone accesses this. What do I need to do? I have to extract her. I have to bring her out. Ideally, I want to bring it out to feel it. I mean, that's the idea. It's an emotion, right? So I want to feel that love that I have naturally. I want to feel that fear. I want to feel that awe. But then the Rebbe says, well, maybe that's a little hard for you. Maybe it's too challenging for you now. I have this feeling inside my soul. All I have to do is feel it. Well, how do I feel it? It's through work, through focusing on it, through being aware of it, through thinking about my relationship with God, feeling how good God is to me, feeling how powerful God is, feeling how close God is, feeling how far God is, all of the techniques we've learned to pull out the emotions that we have. Now, maybe you're going to really succeed and you're going to feel them. Now, of course, sometimes you just feel all this naturally. Of course we do. inspired by situations around us. But we don't want to be a victim of circumstance. We don't want it to only happen when a situation happens that elicits it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, God, you love me so much. I love you so. Yes, of course that happens. These, gifts from God that we just suddenly are flooded with a feeling for him. But the rest of the time, we also want to have a feeling for him. And there's many techniques. Tanya is full of them. We have learned many and we will learn many. One, just to share one to explain what I'm talking about, like the idea of focusing on how much God loves you. As we're told, as we develop for several chapters later in Tanya, the more I'm aware and feel God's love for me, the more I naturally, meaning the feeling in my soul is now coming out, I naturally feel my love and fear of God. That's a technique. It's a very practical technique. It works very well. So maybe you're going to use that technique. I just happen to be mentioning it so you'll understand what I'm saying. And you're going to really think about how much God loves you. And maybe you'll do what I always tell everyone to do, and you're going to have a journal, and you're going to write down every day in your journal all the ways God is good to you, and all the way God loves you, and all the way God's helping you. And you'll more and more and more develop this muscle of how much God loves you. And as you really, really get into how much God loves you, you feel from your soul this love responding of how much you love God. If you do it well, you're going to feel that. You're going to really feel that love, really reflecting God's love for you. But maybe you don't do it as well as that, and you don't feel it. But you are very conscious of it all day long as you notice how good God is to you and how much kindness God's doing and how this worked out and how fortuitous this was and hashgacha pratis that. And you see the hand of God and it could have been so much worse and it's so much better and this worked out and this worked out. And you're so conscious of God's love for you and you're conscious of your love for God, but you don't feel it. Does that count? Yeah. It's like scraping the bottom of the barrel count. Meaning, ideally, we'd like to have the intention of a man. We want to create it with our intellect, and the birds of our commandments have these intense, powerful wings that soar up to heaven. That'd be nice. We can't do that. So we want to, animal-like, without choice, without so much intellect, but obviously some, as we're saying, uncover the feeling we have and really feel it. And then our birds are going to soar with those feelings. That's also great. And maybe not even going to do that. But we're going to work enough on the natural feelings that are embedded in our soul so we consciously, intellectually are aware of it. And with that intellect, we serve God. Okay, you know what? That also created wings. As we'll discuss later, the difference of those wings are not exactly like the other two, but in the end of the day, it'll work. Like the most minimal you can go, like passing a 60. So you got that 60, not a 61, but you got a 60. You went through some of your emissions test for your car and it just made it. We all know about just passing something. So this will be like just passing, but at least it was a pass. There is intention. The commandment is inspired. The commandment is soaring up to God. And that's the least you can do and still have intention. Enough using your mind to awaken the feelings in your soul, to at least be conscious of them on the level of your mind. That the will of your mind and the hidden recesses of your heart. Meaning the Rebbe is saying, if it's really in your mind, on some level you've triggered your heart. It's just not apparent. Maskin, agree, misratza, and wanting, beritzoy gomar, with complete agreement, the emes la'amisa, with absolute truth, limsor nafsho bepoyo mamish. You so much are thinking of God, ideally are feeling it, even on this animal level, that ultimately you just want to be one. You will give up everything. You will sacrifice your very soul. In literal actuality, you would throw away your life for God's sake. In order to cling your godly soul, her garments, that they should be comprised, they should be fused with the oneness of God, which is the will of God, as it's engraved in the study of Torah and the commandments of mitzvah, as we said above. If you really are here, the Rebbe is saying, even on this most minimal, just barely passing level, you're feeling God's reality so much. You're feeling consciously, at least in your mind, and of course, somewhere in the recesses of your heart, God's reality, your love for God, your awe of God. That's it. Nothing else has value. We were just doing this in our chitas, the people that do the daily study of Tanya chitas. Nothing else has value. What could compare to God? Another item you're buying, another vacation you're going on, another what? Nothing. Nothing in the human realm has any value in contrast to God. And therefore, again, intuitively or with deep thought and contemplation, you'll give up everything for God. It's just like this. If this is a Jew's reality, this is a Jew's reality of, sometimes it's hard to see it on our daily basis, but we see it, of course, in more dramatic moments or, big little things, bigger things, and some things that even we can have in our generation or smaller, not smaller things. I'm saying more dramatic things in previous generations. Someone was speaking of his Holocaust memories, Rabbi Mangel, and he was saying he was a child, he was 10 years old, and the Gestapo had taken him and they hadn't gotten any food, and then they gave them some salami. And there was a bunch of people in this room, a bunch of Jews they had taken, and everyone was getting like 2 little slices. And his mother told him to eat it. He's like, no way, I can't eat it. He's a 10-year-old child. It's not kosher. I'm not going to eat trained meat. She's like, you have to. And she begged and pleaded and cried. God forbid, you have to have food. You have no choice. We haven't eaten like in days. This is food. You have to eat it. And just like for her sake, he ate a piece and he just could not hold it down. It all came out. And then she didn't push him to eat the second piece because he couldn't hold down the first piece. It wasn't conscious thought. He wasn't trying to show anything. It was just his Jewish response. He could not eat this. Or famous example of Chassid Lezer Nanas, who was some 20 years in Siberian prison camps and never violated the Sabbath. He never desecrated the Sabbath for 20 years in Soviet prison camps. Was he allowed to? Yeah, technically he was. In his situation, not going into the laws, but legally, according to God's laws, he could have violated those laws because it seemingly was obviously every single week risking his life for 20 years. But he couldn't. Those were examples from previous times. Hopefully those examples we're not going to have in our time. In our time, there's sometimes with job opportunities, if you can compromise here or do it a little differently there, and people that stand up to the plate and say, no, the God today is money, power, career, success. I'm not worshiping that God because I can't separate myself from God. Not worth it. So the more you think about God, as we were saying, I'm just pulling out one tool from the many Tanya proposes. Think about God's love for you. Think about God's reality. Think about God's power. Think about God's kindness. The more it's so real to you that there's nothing else that's as real as God. And if there's nothing else that's as real as God, of course, he comes before everything. Of course, you'd sacrifice everything for him, like these 2 little vignettes I shared where it wasn't required. In both those situations, you were allowed to eat that meat or work on the Sabbath, but how could you do that when God's presence is so real to you? So this is what the Rebbe is saying should happen as we, even on this animal level, and even only getting it into our mind and not be a level and expression in our heart, we still would have this sense of, God, you're all, nothing else has value, and I need to do whatever I need to do. I will do whatever it takes to be one with you. Begam hayir kalulaba. Now, love and fear are the 2 wings of that bird. And good or bad news, birds don't fly with one wing. So when you're serving God, and we again need the love. Maybe just with love, you could be inspired to serve, but your bird can't fly with just love. Maybe just with fear, you could be inspired to serve, but your bird can't fly with just fear. Maybe with awe. Love, fear, awe, any of those can inspire your service. But with only one, a bird doesn't fly. So therefore, we just discussed the love, and now we're saying, of course, there's also the fear or the awe element, because we need two wings, we need our birds to fly. We need our service to ascend to God. Gam here kalulaba. As you're focusing on love, the Rebbe is saying, implicit within that love is the fear, is the awe. L'kabel malchuso, to accept the sovereignty of God. Shlolim robo chas v'shalom, not, God forbid, to rebel against God by not serving Him. V'kavana zu sormei ra, v'oiseh toiv, v'lomed, v'mispal, v'varach, v'heresh hamilos levado. And with this intention, he doesn't do the wrong, and he does the right, and he studies Torah, and prays, and blesses, and he's blessing, even if he's only blessing, only knowing the meaning of the words. He doesn't have a flaming love revealed in his mind and heart, which would be nice, but he doesn't have it. But he's still serving with intention. Right? This is a very strong point that I was making here. Like we're saying here when he prays. You're supposed to pray with intention. You're supposed to have flaming, fiery love and fear. And he doesn't. But because of his work, he has it in his mind enough that he's focusing, enough that he's conscious and aware of the meaning of the words. Great. That still counts. That's still intention. I wish. Okay, maybe someday. But at this moment, if this is all you can achieve, like again, we said it was a 60, but we said that's a pass. You have intention. You are inspired to serve, and your service is ascending to God, and it's drawing down the will of God in an expansive fashion that's flooding your soul. Well, this is like an animal. Right? We said the man is, sorry, someone just sent a message, and I have to hold it up really close to it. Oh, okay. Someone just asked a very, very good question. So I'm going to respond to that question. I was trying, as you can see, to go a little bit quickly because I'm finishing the chapter tonight. And then we're close enough to the end. We've got to finish it. So the question that was asked was, is this concept of animal-like intention called tivuna? Tivuna is something that we discussed in chapter 16 and 17 of Tanya. Not necessarily depends which level. Again, within the animal-like intention could mean completely feeling the natural love and fear your soul has. We're focusing on the lower dimension of the animal-like intention, where you're not feeling it in your heart, but you're aware of it in your mind. That awareness of it in the mind could be tivuna. I don't know if 100% it always is, because it could just be that you didn't give yourself 5 more hours of work and it's going to flower into a feeling in your heart. But it might not. It might be, this is it. This is where you're at least, for this level of your service. And that definitely could be a tivuna. But again, and maybe it wasn't clear because the Rebbe spends so much ink on this lowest level within the animal intention. The animal intention is a whole spectrum. And a person with animal-like intention could have complete passionate love and fear, but it still wasn't choice and wasn't intellect. It was still only, but it's a great only, revealing the natural love and fear of the godly soul. But it's totally flaming in your heart. That's animal-like intention. And the other end of the spectrum is animal-like intention that only is in the hidden recesses of the heart, but is very dominant in the mind. And that sounds very similar, yes, to tivuna. So we're talking here why this is so animal-like. The chomi daisav, and I'm sorry, I know I'm a little bit over, but we're so close to the end. We're just going to go for it. The chomi daisav, all of the emotions of an animal, fear of things that harm him, and love for things that give him pleasure, like food. It's all just instinct. He didn't develop this. This isn't intellectually acquired. This isn't a culture. This is his instincts. Not from any thought process does the animal have fear or desire or love. It's all ingrained in the psyche. The kaf hein al derech mashal hayir v'ava tibius h'mesuteres b'lev kol Yisrael. And this is akin to the natural love and fear and awe that we have in the heart, every single Jew, which is why I'm saying every single Jew loves God and fears God. But maybe we're not feeling that love and fear. And then comes the work, the animal-like work, but it's work, but it's so doable because we have it, but it's still work, using the tools of Tanya more and more and more to feel it. And even if you haven't used that tool, but hopefully, as you're studying Tanya, what I hope is happening to every one of us is God is becoming more and more real. And as God becomes more and more real, your love becomes stronger and stronger, and your awe becomes stronger and stronger. So you're like, wait, which chapter was that from? Which tool was that? It's just the total immersion. As we study these concepts, as we think about these concepts, as we try to live these concepts, God's more and more real. And therefore, again, imagine someone, well, we naturally love our mother. Well, not if you never saw your mother, not if you never had an interaction with your mother, not if your mother never spoke to you. So for some of us, even though we are serving God, God might seem very remote, very distant. He's there, you believe in him, but like that mother that you don't know of at all, though you know she exists. So where's that natural love for my mother? Well, natural love for who? So unfortunately, that's sometimes like it is with us and God. But as you study Tanya, God is more and more real. And everywhere you look, you see him. And therefore, your love naturally is coming out. So someone just responded now as I was saying that and says she definitely has that experience that she's been learning. I know for me, that's my experience with Tanya, which I've been studying for many, many, many years. And it just makes God so real and therefore makes loving him and fearing him so natural. And hopefully everyone here, to a greater degree, to a lesser degree, but hopefully every single person here, as they're studying, yes, which technique is it? You're not sure, but God is more real, and God is more real, and God is more real. And therefore, the love and fear that we all have naturally, without intellect, without choice, we have it embedded in our soul. And it's just coming out through the intellect we are using to study, live, learn, love these concepts. Because we inherited this. We inherited a soul by virtue of very holy ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. This is the nature of our soul. This is the natural state of a Jew. And as we study the Tanya, this natural state hopefully becomes our reality. And with that, we finish chapter 38. Thank you so much for that.